Welcome to the deep dive. You know, lately, it feels like almost every single chat about the future of energy, well, circles back to solar power, doesn't it?
It really does. It's everywhere.
And it's not just talk. I mean, look at the numbers. Last year, 2024, solar PV that accounted for, what, over 70% of all new power capacity installed globally?
Yeah, 70%. It's an incredible rate of growth.
Absolutely. The International Energy Agency even called solar the new king of power generation.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we, quickly get a solid handle on where this really key technology is actually going?
Exactly. And well, that's pretty much our mission for today, isn't it? We're going to take a deep dive into a really insightful piece of research. It's titled Assessing the Impact of Bifacial Solar Photovoltaics on Future Power Systems Based on Capacity Density Optimized Power Plant Yield Modeling.
Whoa, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. But basically, this study gives us a really detailed look at how one specific advancement in solar tech could shape our energy systems, in the years ahead.
Okay, assessing the impact of bifacial solar. Right. So bifacial solar PV. Let's unpack that a bit. These are solar panels that can absorb sunlight from both sides.
That's right. Unlike the sort of traditional ones that just grab sunlight hitting the top surface.
Bifacial ones also capture the light that, bounces off the ground or surroundings under their back.
Exactly. Double-sided, essentially.
And the adoption rate sounds, well, kind of stunning. Projections are saying they'll be over 90% of the market by 2025, like next year.
Yeah, it's moving that fast. They're rapidly becoming the new normal, the standard.
Wow.
Precisely. And this study really acknowledges this huge shift. So its core aims are, well, first, to quantify the energy gains we can realistically expect from these bifacial panels compared to the conventional monofacial ones.
Makes sense. How much extra juice do we get?
Right. And second, it delves into the optimal design. Like, how should we lay out these bifacial solar power plants to maximize not just energy generation, but also how efficiently we use the land?
The land use aspect.
Yeah.
That's critical too.
Definitely. And third, it kind of steps back to look at the broader implications for our future energy landscape. So thinking about how this tech interacts with other crucial bits like wind power and energy storage, batteries and things.
Got it. So we're not just talking about a minor tweak here. This could be a pretty significant evolution in how we harness solar. Okay, so when it comes to that extra energy, the yield gains from bifacial modules, what were the main findings of this study? How much more efficient are they really?
Well, what's really interesting here, and maybe a bit counterintuitive, is that this study found that while bifacial panels do increase energy production, the boost is generally less dramatic than what you might get from another strategy using single-axis trackers.
Okay, trackers, those are the ones where the panels physically follow the sun across the sky.
Exactly, tilting through the day. And this study indicates that single-axis tracking typically leads to something like a 15 to 20% increase in energy yield.
15 to 20. Okay, that's substantial.
It is. Now, in comparison, the benefit just from switching from monofacial to bifacial panels, holding everything else constant, is often more in the range of, say, up to 10% in most places globally.
Okay, so moving the panels seems to pack a bigger punch in most scenarios. But wait, this study did find situations where bifacial really comes into its own, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely, it did. This study emphasizes that in certain scenarios, the gains from the bifacial tech itself can be more pronounced.
Like where?
Well, what's particularly noteworthy is that fixed tilt systems, the panels installed at a set angle that don't move, they tend to show a higher percentage increase in yield when they go bifacial compared to when tracking systems go bifacial.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Well, the reasoning, according to this study, seems to be that tracking systems are often already angled to really maximize the direct sunlight hitting the front. That optimization means the back surface, well, it just receives less indirect light to capture.
Okay. So the tracker's already doing such a good job on the front side, there's sort of less room for the backside to add a huge percentage more?
Kind of, yeah. But it's crucial to remember, right, that even with that nuance, adding bifacial modules still contributes to a significant overall energy increase in tracking setups, too.
Yeah.
It's just the relative boost might be smaller percentage-wise compared to fixed tilt.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Now, this study also dug into this idea of fitting more solar power into a given area capacity density, you call it. What did they find there?
Right. So This study presents a new way to think about optimizing this capacity density, basically, how much power generating potential you can pack into, say, a square kilometer, without needing super detailed, location specific land cost data, which can be hard to get consistently.
Okay, a more general approach.
Sort of, yeah. Their analysis shows that by carefully tweaking the tilt angles, especially for fixed tilt systems, and also the distance between the rows of panels, what we call the row pitch.
How close together they are.
Exactly. By adjusting those, we can significantly increase how densely we can build these solar power plants.
That's fascinating. Can you give us a sense of the numbers? Like, how much more power could we potentially squeeze out of the same patch of land?
Well, according to this study, with the efficiency of solar modules we have today, strategically adjusting these factors could theoretically push capacity density as high as 147 megawatts per square kilometer.
147 megawatts per square kilometer. That sounds like a lot.
It is potentially very high. However, this study also notes that a more, perhaps realistic average range, assuming a common module efficiency around 20%, would likely fall between maybe 70 and 110 milliW per square kilometer.
Okay, even 70 to 110 milliW is still a huge amount of power from a relatively contained space. So it sounds like really smart design. Thinking about tilt and spacing specifically for bifacial tech could really help us maximize land use, which is often a constraint.
Absolutely. It's about optimizing the whole layout.
Okay, let's zoom out again. The big picture. According to this study, how does widespread adoption of bifacial solar PV potentially reshape our whole energy system? Does it have major knock-on effects on other sources?
Yeah, this is where this study provides some really interesting system-level insights. Their overall conclusion, looking out to 2040, is that the impact of bifacial solar PV is actually, well, maybe not as revolutionary as some might have expected.
Oh, not a total game changer then.
That's how they frame it. Their modeling, which was pretty extensive, covering 145 regions globally, showed an average change in the total installed solar PV capacity of around plus or minus 10%, depending on the region and scenario, just from introducing bifacial.
Okay, so plus or minus 10%. A noticeable adjustment for sure, but maybe not fundamentally transforming the total amount of solar we expect to build just because of bifacial. What about wind power? We always hear about solar and wind complementing each other.
Right. Well, this study found an average decrease of about 10% in the installed capacity of wind power across the scenarios that included bifacial solar.
A decrease in wind. Why would that be?
The underlying reason, as this study suggests, seems to be economic competition. The increased energy yield from bifacial solar, even if modest, can make it slightly more cost-effective in certain regions. This might lead to a slightly lower overall need for wind power to meet the total energy demand targets in those models.
Ah, so they become slightly stronger competitors in some areas.
Exactly. Though this study did note this effect was more pronounced in areas that were already, heavily leaning towards solar anyway.
Interesting interplay. Okay, what about energy storage? Batteries. Does bifacial change how much storage capacity we might need?
Yeah, this study indicated a small average increase, actually, around 5% in the amount of battery storage capacity needed when bifacial solar was integrated.
An increase. Why more storage?
Well, the likely explanation here is that the potentially higher peaks in solar generation during the middle of the day, thanks to that extra bifacial yield, might require slightly more storage. You need somewhere to put that extra midday energy to smooth out the supply, right?
Yeah.
And make sure power is available later when the sun isn't shining.
Right, capturing and shifting that bigger solar peak. Makes sense. Okay, and the bottom line question. Does going bifacial make our electricity cheaper overall? What did this study find about the levelized cost of electricity, the LCOE?
On a global average, this study calculated a decrease, but a fairly small one. Approximately 2% in the levelized cost of electricity when bifacial PV was widely adopted.
2%. Okay, so helpful, contributes to affordability. Again, maybe not a massive drop just from this one technology switch.
Precisely. So overall, this study concludes that while bifacial solar PV offers definite advantages, it allows for system improvements, better land use, slightly cheaper power. It shouldn't really be seen as a complete game changer that's going to fundamentally alter the trajectory of future power systems all by itself.
All right, so let's try and recap the key takeaways from this study. In terms of pure energy yield boost, single-axis tracking generally wins out over just switching to bifacial, giving maybe 15–20% versus up to 10% for bifacial alone in many places.
Generally, yes.
But bifacial gains can be significant, especially, it seems, in fixed tilt setups where they give a bigger percentage bump.
Correct.
And we can definitely achieve higher capacity densities, packing more power per square kilometer by optimizing tilt and row spacing. especially with bifacial tech in mind. Maybe hitting 70, 110 milliW kilometer realistically.
Yes, significant potential there.
And then looking at the whole system in 2040, this study suggests bifacial adoption leads to some adjustments. Maybe 10% less wind overall, perhaps 5% more battery storage, and electricity that's, on average, about 2% cheaper.
That sums it up well.
But the researchers' verdict is beneficial and improvement allows optimization, but not quite a game changer on its own.
Exactly. And I think a really crucial takeaway from this study, maybe the most important one for people modeling future energy, is that we have to include these advanced solar PV technologies, like bifacial, like tracking systems. We need them in our calculations if we want accurate models of how our energy systems are actually going to evolve.
Absolutely. You can't just model generic solar anymore.
Right. To overlook these details would be to miss a really significant piece of the puzzle moving forward.
Definitely highlights the need for that detailed view.
Yeah.
Thinking about this, given that bifacial tech offers this extra yield, and potentially, as you mentioned, maybe not at a vastly higher manufacturing cost than traditional panels, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? What else is influencing the pace of adoption?
Good question.
Are there, like, policy hurdles, maybe? Or limitations in our grid infrastructure? Or is it just perceptions among investors or even consumers that might be acting as a kind of brake, slowing down even wider, faster adoption?
That's a really insightful point. What are the non-technical barriers?
Yeah. And then looking beyond bifacial, what other innovations in solar are on the horizon? What might actually hold the potential to be those truly game-changing breakthroughs everyone is looking for? Perovskites, tandem cells, something else entirely.
Those are exactly the kinds of questions that naturally bubble up after digging into a study like assessing the impact of bifacial solar photovoltaics on future power systems based on capacity, density, optimized power plant yield modeling. It really underscores that, while the tech itself is vital, the actual energy transition involves navigating this whole complex landscape, practical stuff, economics, policy, even societal
This
factors.
is definitely more than just the panel tech itself, isn't it? Well, if you, the listener, are keen to really get into the weeds of this analysis and understand the potential, and maybe the limits, of bifacial solar in more detail, definitely seek out the full study. Again, that's assessing the impact of bifacial solar photovoltaics on future power systems based on capacity density optimized power plant yield modeling. It's a fascinating deep dive in its own right.
It really is worth a read if you're interested in the details.
Thanks so much for joining us for this exploration on the deep dive.